on those Coca-Cola shares, owner of SPC Mona today. Well, email and social media continue to present thorny issues for employers. Where should the line be drawn when it comes to office fun and banter? And at what point does the content of your private Facebook messages become capable of putting your job at risk? Those are some of the recent issues that have faced the Fair Work Commission. Here to discuss some of those recent cases, what it means for your business. Joydeep Hoare, Managing Principal of Specialist Employment Law Firm People and Culture Strategies with us. Joydeep, great to see you as always. Just firstly, take us through some of these recent decisions and how significant they are.
Yeah, so two decisions only in the last 2 or 3 weeks, both from the Fair Work Commission. In one instance, an employee sends an email around to all staff as a result of the boss buying a Lamborghini to celebrate 20 years of service with the company, and inferring that the boss is a not too pleasant word, and actually uses that word in the email message. So it's a sexually expletive word, intended in jest, but when it comes to the attention of the boss that this email has gone around, he dismisses the employee who sent the message on the spot. The second decision involved an HR manager of an organisation who sent a private email message via Facebook to the boss's wife, saying that she, the HR manager, had some concerns in relation to the boss and his management style and certain things that he was doing. The boss finds out about the email message and dismisses the HR manager on the spot. In both of the factual circumstances, and both dismissed employees brought unfair dismissal claims, the Fair Work Commission found that in both cases the dismissal was unfair. So the employer was not within its rights to take the action that it took, and awards compensation in both cases. Very, very interesting, because as we've been discussing for quite some time now, social media and how that's managed by employers is complex. And I think a lot of employers have probably been in the headspace up to now that anything that is done by their employees using social media is something that they can respond to and take action in relation to. And both of these decisions say, well, it's not quite that simple. In the first case, where the employee sent the email as a result of the boss buying the car, the Commission looked very closely at the culture of the organisation. And so when it was discovered that the culture of this organisation was one where people would regularly send inappropriate pornographic emails, and there was a lot of vulgarity and jokes and inappropriate language, in that context the particular email that was sent was actually seen as being pretty mild and certainly didn't warrant termination. In the second case, it was found that that was a private message, had nothing to do with work, would always have remained a private message, and therefore the employer wasn't within its rights to terminate in that case. So I think the lesson really here for employers is that by all means you need to have standards, and you're entitled to enforce standards, but you can't be too liberal. You can't just assume that because you've got a policy that says employees can't engage in inappropriate behaviour using social media, that means that you can't look and don't have to look at the particular circumstances of what it is that the person has done. In both of these cases, those particular circumstances actually resulted in the employer being very embarrassed and found to have done the wrong thing.
Is there something, I mean, can you sort of specify what content, can be sent in emails and the like in sort of workplace behaviour guidelines?
It's very difficult. I mean, it's the same as trying to regulate any form of behaviour through a policy. So, for example, most employers should have, and probably do have, a policy that says you can't engage in sexual harassment and inappropriate racial comments or whatever. But you can't be so specific, you can't get to that level of granularity that's going to cover every single instance that might get someone in trouble. So in that sexual harassment context, okay, it's some things you would like to think are obvious, but what about jokes? What about sharing information about your private life? What about when you're talking about yourself rather than talking about someone else? Is it okay to talk about an issue that's in the media, for example, albeit that has a slightly sexual bent? All of these things have come before the courts and tribunals. It just highlights that the management of behaviour for employers is more difficult now than it ever has been. Policies are helpful, but they've really got to come to grips with the education piece. I think giving people a policy and saying, here you go, read it, comply with it, it's just not enough these days. You've got to take the time to sit down with your staff and say, this is what we mean when we talk about the kinds of behaviours that we expect.
All right, Joydeep, great to get your thoughts on the most current issues in industrial relations. Thank you so much for that. Joydeep Hoare there, Managing Principal of People and Culture Strategies.